Good morning. It's the middle of the week, Wednesday, February 26th. This is Wake Up with KERA News, and I'm Andrew Garcia. Today is going to be mostly sunny, with temperatures reaching into the mid-70s, even the 80s in some places, though there's a pretty good chance of rain tonight, with a cold front set to sweep in over the evening. The National Endowment of the Arts has changed its policy on what programs are eligible for funding, and we'll hear that story and how it's affecting some North Texas arts institutions. That's all after today's news. Dallas City and real estate leaders are looking for a way to keep the Neiman Marcus flagship store open downtown. Saks Global was notified by a landlord to end its occupancy by the end of March, but city manager Kimberly Beiser-Tolbert said in a press conference that Neiman Marcus sets the standard for excellence and potential growth in the city. The Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth has chosen its new director. Helona Norton Westbrook comes to Fort Worth from the Honolulu Museum of Art. She'll join the museum as it faces challenges like rising costs and an ongoing investigation into child pornography in one of its former exhibits. The National Endowment of the Arts recently announced changes to its grant funding. One of the most significant, it won't support programs that include diversity, equity, and inclusion. KERA's Elizabeth Mayong spoke to Bekah Morr about the North Texas arts groups that have been affected by these changes.
So in the last couple of weeks, we've heard a lot about the rollback of DEI programs because of President Trump's executive orders. It sounds like this has reached the arts now.
Yes, so the National Endowment of the Arts provides millions of dollars in grants to arts groups across the country, including some here in North Texas. And now they've canceled the Challenge America grant program that specifically supports the arts in underserved communities. And in a webinar last week, NEA representatives also said,
in accordance with the president's executive orders, the NEA will not fund projects that include DEI activities.
Were there any North Texas groups affected by the cancellation of this specific grant?
In January, the NEA announced the 2025 recipients of the Challenge America grant. One of those recipients is Ballet North Texas. The company's executive director, Nicolina Lawson, says she expected to receive $10,000 to put on sensory-friendly ballet shows for people with autism, PTSD, or Down syndrome. But now she's not sure she'll receive that funding.
On the NEA website, I feel like some of it is like political jargon. And so it's also reading it and trying to really understand what they're trying to say. I feel like that's 90% of it.
Lawson says it takes hours of work to apply for these grants and years of reapplying and getting feedback just to reach this point. And right now, it feels like all that work might be taken away. And another group we spoke to, Flamenco Fever, says they have also not received their grant money.
Has the NEA clarified any of this at all?
Like I mentioned before, the agency did host a webinar last week, but they didn't spell out what would happen to 2025 funding. And when we reached out to the NEA, they sent an email saying the 2025 grants were approved under a different administration. And they would continue to review recent executive orders to make sure arts groups comply. What that actually means and the definition of DEI programs hasn't been explained, though.
That sounds kind of concerning, knowing that a lot of arts groups are already struggling to get funding.
Yeah, and now they're trying to understand all these guidelines when it's not clear what they mean or even how they'll be enforced. So one of the new ones that seems quite specific says federal funds won't be used to promote gender ideology. But again, we're not sure how the NEA will interpret that.
So I'm assuming the recent changes are a shift from how the NEA has worked in the past.
Yes, it's definitely a shift. I spoke to Academia Theater's David Lozano. In previous years, he served as a NEA panelist who would help decide grant funding for theater groups. He says panelists considered criteria like artistic merit, but also whether theater programming was inclusive and accessible to the local community. Lozano isn't sure what all the recent changes will mean, but he emphasized the importance of artistic freedom and diversity.
What's important about an artistic community, an artistic and cultural ecosystem, is that it has a multiplicity of ideas and representation of different not just points of view, but has contributions from different cultures.
Has there been any more information on how the NEA plans to enforce the new guidelines?
Like with everything else, that remains unclear. The general vibe we've gotten from arts groups is confusion. We don't really know how all of this is going to play out right now.
That was KERA's Elizabeth Mayong speaking with Bekah Morr. The Stars lost to the Columbus Blue Jackets last night, 6-4, and the Mavericks come back from LA with a loss as well against the Lakers. Final score of 107-99. It was a tough watch for Mavs fans having to see Luka Doncic take on his former team for the first time since being unceremoniously traded a few weeks back. Doncic had a modest game for his standards, racking up a double-double with 19 points and 12 assists. For a night of stand-up, improv, and musical comedy, check out the Noisemakers variety show tonight at Mic Drop Comedy in Plano. The show is 21 and up. You can find some other fun things to do as well at kera.org/calendar. Thank you so much for listening to Wake Up with KERA News. I'm your host, Andrew Garcia. This show is produced and edited by Shardae White and Bekah Morr. For more news in your inbox, visit kera.org/wakeup. That's where you can subscribe to the Wake Up with KERA News newsletter and get some good morning vibes from our colleague Catherine Hobbs. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at KERATX. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow.